Just how much damage did U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites truly do? This morning, House lawmakers will receive their classified briefings on the strikes after it was delayed earlier this week. Yesterday, senators emerged from their briefing divided, largely along party lines. And CNN has exclusive reporting that the U.S. has secretly been trying to get Iran back to the negotiating table before and after those strikes. Joining me now, CNN Global Affairs commentator Sabrina Singh. Thank you so much for being here. I want to talk about this new reporting that we've gotten from our reporters here at CNN. Several sources saying that the Trump administration has discussed possibly helping Iran access as much as $30 billion to build a civilian energy producing nuclear program, easing sanctions, and freeing up billions of dollars in restricted Iranian funds to get Iran back to the negotiating table. And I'm curious, because of your tenure at the Pentagon, is this similar to the deal President Obama cut with Iran back in 2015 that halted, at the time, Iran's push towards a nuclear weapon?
There's similar contours to what President Obama had originally proposed and what was ultimately signed in that first nuclear deal that ultimately the Trump administration pulled out of. There was some concessions when it came to, of course, sanctions, and of course that deal limited the enriched uranium that Iran was being able to produce at that time. Now, since the first Trump administration pulled the United States out of that deal, Iran has, of course, sped ahead and continued to enrich uranium levels. And so the deal that is now being proposed that's on the table is very similar to the deal that was proposed before the United States conducted those strikes over the weekend on those three nuclear facilities. I think the big thing here that I'm watching is before those strikes and the rhetoric that we've heard out of Iran is that they are drawing the line. They have a red line when it comes to enriched uranium. They want to keep continuing to do that, but now they are in such a different and weakened
Mm.
state economically and militarily, and of course their air defenses have been taken out, that this might be a little bit of the United States saying, okay, let's check your bluff, and let's see what you're
Mm.
willing to negotiate on right now.
I want to ask you a little bit deeper on that question. Iran's supreme leader has come out and spoke for the first time since the U.S. strikes, saying that Iran succeeded in destroying the enemy's capabilities. Not true. He also said U.S. strikes on Iran were not much more than, as he put it, Trump's, quote, showmanship. He's speaking as if nothing has changed in Iran. We know that it has, but no matter how much damage the nuclear facilities have, isn't Iran really between a rock and a hard place at this point in time, knowing that the threat of more strikes is still there?
I think absolutely, and you characterize that accurately. Iran is definitely in between a rock and a hard place. I think their senior leadership knows that, but at the end of the day, they are going to have to message to their people a position of strength. And so you're seeing some of that propaganda being messaged to the Iranian people to show, that the United States didn't have any effect on our capabilities. But we know the reality, and the reality is that Israel really does control the skies over Tehran, and that is a huge blow to the Iranian regime. And so, I think that they really have to consider the fact that a majority of their air defenses have been wiped out by the
Mm.
Israeli military. And of course, their nuclear facilities have been, I would say, deeply destroyed or damaged. While they're going to continue to message and use these propaganda talking points, I think within the Iranian regime, certainly within the senior
Mm.
leadership ranks, they know that they're going to have to come to the table with something.
Should anyone be making a determination as to exactly what happened, whether it's President Trump saying obliterated or you have Democrats saying that they don't think that there's as much damage that has been made? Should anyone be making these statements because they are just learning from the preliminary intelligence?
Certainly no. I think part of gathering intelligence is to knit together a picture of how successful these strikes are. And that DIA assessment that came out a few days ago was an initial assessment. And that is what is going to continue to build. The intelligence community is going to continue to use signals intelligence, human intelligence to get a better picture of how successful these strikes are. Now, of course, the DIA assessment was leaked, and that has, of course, been a point of friction with this administration and others. But I think at the reality, at the end of the day, and hearing from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, these strikes were a huge success. I don't think you can just dismiss that. Our
Yeah.
military conducted an incredible operation. There was damage to these facilities, but how much damage I think remains to be seen. And that's what this battle damage assessment is going to be ongoing for a while.
Yeah, the question is over the degree of success
Right.
for the U.S. that happened in Iran. Thank you so much, Sabrina Singh. Really appreciate you.
Lawmakers have received a briefing about the state of Iran's nuclear program following the U.S. strikes on the nuclear facilities. Lawmakers seem split down party lines about how much damage was actually done.
It still appears that we have only set back the Iranian nuclear program by a handful of months.
We've caused catastrophic damage to Iran's nuclear program.
Based on what I heard, is Iran continues to be a threat.
Obliterated is a good word for me to use.
Now, in just a few hours, members of the House will receive their classified briefing about the attack in Iran. Following the strikes, CNN has learned the Trump administration is opening the door to restarting nuclear negotiations. Talks of easing sanctions and developing a multi-billion-dollar civilian nuclear non-enrichment program, all being discussed to get Iran back to the negotiating table. Iran's foreign minister says there aren't any immediate plans to resume talks given Washington's history of betraying negotiations. All that as Iran's supreme leader, in his first televised address since the Israel-Iran ceasefire, promised to retaliate if the U.S. strikes again. Joining me now is CNN Global Affairs analyst Kim Dozier. Kim, good morning.
Good morning.
So we've been hearing about back channels potentially opening up. We've heard also this rhetoric, though, out of Iran. So what would it even mean? What would those back channels be? Who would help facilitate that?
Well, the Trump administration has been in contact with Iran through intermediaries the day before the Saturday strikes and since. What they've been trying to do all along is pressure Iran into accepting a stepped down civilian nuclear program where Iran would not enrich uranium, but allow other countries to enrich it and then ship it in. Even though Iran is a signatory of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the U.S. argument goes that because it had taken so many steps towards weaponization, that it's lost its enrichment privileges, should give them up and agree to this sort of supervised civilian nuclear program. And so far, Iran hasn't agreed to that.
One thing I'm hearing you say, just want to underscore the idea that enriched uranium would come from outside the country and be brought in. Can you talk about the other things that might be on the table?
Well, Iran is facing a snapback of European sanctions come this fall when that original Obama-era Iran nuclear deal expires. While the Trump administration pulled out of it, the European nations stayed in, and those sanctions could be pretty crippling to Iran on top of lots of existing sanctions from the U.S. So there is this carrot and stick opportunity where the U.S. works with these European nations and says to Iran, if you say yes to this supervision, we will help you rebuild some of the sites that we helped destroy. We will give you all sorts of other reconstruction aid. The problem is in Iran right now, the attitude is you just proved yourselves untrustworthy. Why should we negotiate with you?
You know, it seems that Trump does want another nuclear deal, right? That there's some plan. We actually heard former Secretary of State John Kerry slam the administration for pulling out of that Obama-era deal, of course. I want you to listen to what he shared with our colleague Christiane Amanpour.
I know this. You cannot bomb away the memory of how to make a bomb. You can't bomb away the knowledge that they have developed. You can't bomb away the broad array of technicians who've been working on this for years, who will go back to work if that's the mission they're given by the leadership of the country.
Is there a version of a deal that has more teeth than the one that was signed before, that meets the higher bar that I'm sure Israel would want as well?
Well, in a sense, Israel has changed the game because it's crossed the Rubicon of striking Iran and will surely strike Iran again the moment it sees anything that looks like a weaponization program. And so that serves as something that's in the background, hovering as a threat over everything. But I have to emphasize that within Iran, there'd always been this debate, and the Supreme Leader had ruled against it to build a weapon to protect itself. Now the hardliners in the regime who've been arguing with the Supreme Leader to say, we've got to build at least one bomb so no one does this again, they're going to be empowered, and that's going to weigh heavily against any voices that say, hey, let's say yes to a deal with the Americans who just struck us and the Europeans who are powerless to stop Israel or the United States.
Kimberly Dozier is CNN's global affairs analyst.